Hi, hello. This is part two of my January and February reading wrap up, which basically just means 2024 so far, book wise, and there's lots more books. So there are exactly 6 books of the same author, Elena Ferrante. She's so good, she's brilliant. I've been talking about this book forever. Well, ever since. Well, not this book in particular, but just this author. If you don't know Elena Ferrante, she's an Italian author, so this is translated fiction. She is known to write novels. The nonfiction books that exist of her are basically compilations of interviews or lectures. Elena Ferrante is a pseudonymous author, so it means we don't know who she is, what her real name is, her life. She has chosen to remain completely private, which I imagine isn't easy once you become a very popular, famous author. She had her books translated in many different languages. I don't even know how many languages, but a lot. She sold millions of copies, no doubt. She's known all over the world in the little sphere of readers. I read a 4-part book series that she wrote called the Neapolitan Quartet. The Neapolitan Quartet. That was a mouthful. Damn. Yeah, I don't know where to put the stresses. Well, anyway, it's basically a 4-part book series that she envisioned as one big story. When she started writing, she realized that it would take a lot of time, a lot of pages to write the story that she wanted to write. And that's because we follow the lives of 2 girls that then become women over 70 years. They meet when they're little girls in a very poor neighborhood in Naples in the 1950s, which was a very turbulent time because it was just after World War II, Mussolini. She manages to make the war so present without it being directly mentioned. Like, you can just see it in how the characters are acting or reacting. Extreme patriarchal, sexist mentality. Women were the property of men, and when you got married, your duty was just to make children. I'm actually in Paris right now preparing the feminist video that I'm going to post on International Women's Day on the 8th of March. Well, I'm gonna try because it's in a few days. I don't even know what it means to say that a novel is feminist, because it is the story of how 2 girls grow up and that kind of have to deal with the consequences and the results of sexism. In these 4 books, you have drama, intrigue, you have complicated relationships between the characters who are all part of these different families in the poor neighborhood. You definitely have a set of peripheral characters that are very rich and that have a very important role in the girls' lives. And that way, it's a pretty genius book, I must say. And yeah, that's why I'm talking about feminism, because after having read, I'm just gonna talk about these Elena Ferrante books in a sort of global thing so that I won't spend too much time on each of the 4 books of the Neapolitan Quartet, nor the 2 books that I've read of hers afterwards. Frantumaglia, the only book that I have with me. It's basically a compilation of all the interviews that Elena Ferrante gave about the writing of her books, about what informs her writing. A lot of interestingly intense question and very direct questions on her identity. A lot of times you see people asking very similar questions, or sometimes even the exact same question. Why don't you reveal your identity? Will you ever reveal it one day? Why have you not? Was it something that triggered it? Is it difficult? It's a lot of questions about her decision to become anonymous. And it's super interesting. You have all the answers here. It also raises the question of who is the author? Is the author relevant? Does he matter? Does she matter? What influence does the identity of the author have over everything else? Very, very good question. One that has been debated so many times. When you think about The Bell Jar with Sylvia Plath, I heard that there were still scholars discussing her depression and the influence that it had over writing The Bell Jar, and if it is or was or would ever be relevant, and in what context it would be relevant to talk about her private life. I certainly don't have set opinions about that, so I just find it interesting how she takes her stance and defends it, and I understand. If you're very curious, basically it comes down to just the need for privacy and the desire not to partake in the publishing industry. She wants to just write her stories, and publishing is a very different process for her that she separates and that she doesn't necessarily want to get involved in. Although, of course, then here you can see the sort of inner battle between two parts of yourself as a writer and also as an artist of any kind, the one that is just, focused on the craft and the writing and the pleasure of creating whatever it is that you create. Words on a paper, paintings. It's so completely different from that other side where it actually gets to reach people. And I feel like there's a threshold wherein you have a work of art, whether it's a book or an essay or a painting again or a sculpture. Then there's the art of delivering, of reaching an audience, of trying to integrate it into your livelihood so as to not depend on other jobs that pull you away from your passions. What I thought when I read Frantumaglia. I don't know. It's okay. Frantumaglia. I have no idea if that's correct. Italians, you can tell me. So that was interesting. Her other book that I read after I finished the Neapolitan Quartet was In the Margins, and I thought that was fascinating because she gave precisely insight on writing the Neapolitan Quartet. A lot of this book I actually skipped. I would say I skipped half of it because she's speaking about the novels of hers that I haven't read yet. So I only read the 4-part book series plus a novel of hers called The Lost Daughter. So all of these have adaptations. If you're not interested in reading a 1,600-page book saga of these two girls' friendship, there is an HBO adaptation which is pretty good, because I'm usually very tough with my judgments on adaptations. Often they're just, you have to treat them as they are. They're just a different medium to tell a story. How I would, I think, qualify brilliant books. Certainly the books that I have decided are my new favorites. Yes, of course, the Neapolitan Quartet is a new favorite. When you're a reader that just is here for the story, the pure entertainment of the drama unfolding, the events, and then the underlying layers are so meticulously crafted. That was certainly the case for The Goldfinch. That was certainly the case for The Beach by Alex Garland that I talked about in part 1. And it certainly is the case for the Neapolitan Quartet. In the booktube newbie tag that I did a few videos ago, I was talking about the one book that I just love so much, and that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I think they're on the same level now. And I feel like obviously Station 11 is more recommendable to a wide array. They're just different books, obviously, different ways of telling a story. Just so good. It's the story of how they separate and come back, and how female friendship is explored through their relationship. Elena Ferrante often talks about how we have such a huge male literary heritage that there's actually very little, and that's why she writes mostly stories of women and mothers and daughters. But there's actually so little female literary heritage. It also means that men have developed a certain code of friendship that is completely different to women's. And women's has been a bit less explored in popular culture, in representations. So that was Elena Ferrante. I feel like I even haven't said enough about this. I completely missed something. I've been talking about this for so long. It's just so full of stuff. It's kind of like The Goldfinch. You have layers upon layers upon layers, but you also have this one thread, this one character who goes through life and who evolves through life. And through her, we also get Lila's story. And it's interesting, it's fascinating how interconnected they are and how close, we feel as close to Lila as we feel to Elena. And it's so good. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. I'm going to go to the story graph on my phone to check on the books that I read, because I do not remember exactly. And I have the list here. One book that I audiobooked called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. In my booktube newbie tag, I said I would read it. I chose to listen to it instead. I like these kind of narratives or books better when I listen to them. It's kind of like a podcast. It was introduced to me somewhere online. I don't remember exactly who or what, maybe it was a blog post, maybe it was a video or a podcast episode, but someone recommended this book saying that it was a book about life disguised as a book about time management. And that's so true. It's really true. So he basically says that the average lifespan of a human being is 4,000 weeks. And so he invites us to rethink time management. He used to be a productivity freak. It's very funny how he describes himself. We have busy lives, and in the modern world, we just don't know how to divide things anymore, and there's too many options and things like that. And all things that I'm very familiar with and things that have been plaguing my mind as well, especially since having children. Time is just a luxury, and sometimes you need to take the time that it takes to do the stuff that you need to do. That was an interesting book. It was really confronting. I found it absolutely necessary. I've been wanting to read it just because I just want to have more insights about how to live, what to consider as you live. And time is definitely something to consider because it's the currency in which we live in a way. Life is grounded to time, at least from our perception of time. That's a whole debate, and it does present the philosophical question pretty well, succinctly, which is not easy to talk about something so profound as time and how to relate it to our modern world and how we live. He definitely invites the reader to contemplate on that, to wonder what is worth it. So he's talking about people that also have a lot of different passions or a lot of different commitments, and it's just difficult to actually have so many commitments and do them right. And so he advocates for really stripping down your life to the bare essential, saying that what is difficult isn't necessarily to choose stuff, but what is difficult in itself is the ability to say no. One thing that really struck me about this book was at some point when he was saying, like, make a list of the 20 things that you're doing or like that you would want to do in life. And that can be anything from, like being a rock climber as a hobby, or painter, or learning a language, or this or that. And he's not advocating for it to be stagnant, but like at any given time, he says, okay, you have a list of 20 things. Now strip it down to 5 and just do that. And the danger is all those things are exciting enough for you to get distracted from the main things that you should be doing if you want to do them well. Sometimes people just have these passions and they fall into things and they're very happy and content in what they've come into. But there's also other people that like to experiment, people that are more jack of all trades and want to live different things and want to engage in different things and want to get involved in different things and want to start new hobbies constantly and just want to kind of squeeze life out. And there's a lot of people like that. Not to mention, if you have children or if you have a family or a partner or parents that you have to take care of, there's just so many things in life that sometimes just take a whole chunk of our time. Personally, I have issues with that, and this book was great, reminding me of what the important things were and what to give time to, and you have to sacrifice certain things in order to do other things. We have a difficult time making commitments because we basically have a difficult time or an impossible time or just a very turbulent time confronting our mortality. So we think we have endless amounts of time, and that's why we can't make commitments. So it's a very interesting philosophical question. Let me know what you think in the comments, if that sounds interesting to you or if you've read it. I definitely recommend it. I could imagine that it could be a life-changing book for many people. The next book I want to talk about was a beautiful, magnificent book. It's insane. Here we are again talking about Mary Oliver. In part 1, I mentioned her 1,000 Mornings poetry collection, and now I'm going to talk about Winter Hours, which is more of a prose poetry and prose. And I love Mary Oliver's writing in general, but the fact that she wrote such little prose, for me, feels like it's so precious and special. I love when poets write prose because you can really feel a mastery of the language, of the sounds. It's so smooth. Some sort of literary sorcery going on when poets write prose. Whether they write a novel or they write essays, something happens. Something magical, irreplaceable. And I have been observing that and I'm fascinated by it. I'm absolutely nerding out about the structure and the language of poets when they write prose. That's it. So I don't have the book with me, but I took some pictures of the passages that I like. That's sometimes when I underline or annotate my books, I don't really like to put the tags. I just like to take pictures of the pages and have them in a little album, and it's kind of like how I find quotes things like that, from books that I really liked. She has an essay about Edgar Allan Poe, about Wordsworth, and how they have influenced her writing and her mind. So here I am walking on down the sandy path with my wild body, with the inherited devotions of curiosity and respect. The moment is full of such exquisite interest as Fabre or Flaubert would have been utterly alive to. Yes, it is a din of voices that I hear, and they do not all say the same thing, but the fit of thoughtfulness unites them. Who are they? For me, they are Shelley, and Faber and Wordsworth, the young Wordsworth, and Barbara Ward, and Blake, and Basho, Maeterlinck, and Jastrow, and sweetest Emerson, and Carson, and Aldo Leopold. Forebears, models, spirits whose influence and teachings I am now inseparable from, and forever grateful for. I go nowhere, I arrive nowhere without them. With them I live my life. With them I enter the event. I mold the meditation. I keep, if I can, some essence of the hour, even as it slips away. And I do not accomplish this alert and loving confrontation by myself and alone, but through terrifying and continual effort, and with this innumerable fortifying company bright as stars in the heaven of my mind. Were they seed eaters? Were they meat eaters? Not the point. They were dreamers and imaginers and declarers. They lived looking and looking and looking, seeing the apparent and beyond the apparent, wondering, allowing for uncertainty, also grace, easygoing here, ferociously unmovable there. They were thoughtful. A few voices, strict and punctilious, like Shelley's, like Thoreau's, cry out, "Change, change!" But most don't say that. They simply say, "Be what you are, of the earth, but a dreamer too." Wow, wasn't that sentence just amazing? Be what you are, of the earth, but a dreamer too. I should get that tattooed. Here we go again. This is a mistake, Sarah. Do not get random tattoos. Think about it. I do not have random tattoos. I have very thought out tattoos. Although, you know what? I wouldn't mind getting a random tattoo if it was a good context. Anyway, moving on. One of the last books I read this month, actually when I was filming part 1 of this series, is Madonna in a Fur Coat by, again, apologies for my accent. Why did I rate this 4-star? Ooh, maybe. Yes, because I rated it 4.5, but why wasn't I generous and just rated it 5 stars? I don't know. No, 5 stars is for special events, for things that make me cry. Although I was very close to like crying at some point. So yes, the book I'm talking about is Madonna in a Fur Coat by Sabahattin Ali, a Turkish author. It was published in the 1940s, early 1940s. So yes, wartime. Translated by Maureen Freely and Alexander Daw. It says here there's 2 translators on Goodreads. Super interesting book. I'm just going to read it to you because I want it to be as precise as possible. The best-selling Turkish classic of love and longing in a changing world, available in English for the first time. So I think the translation only came out in 2016. I saw it on Instagram and I thought, wow, that's a perfect title. I literally just got it for the title. Well, not really for the title. I thought the title was cool, looked it up, and then when I read the blurb that I'm going to read to you right now, I was like, okay, I'm gonna read that. And then I was happy because I got it and it was pretty slim. It's a 100-page book. You would say it's a novella. You can read it in a day or 2. You can read it in 1 sitting. That's also relevant to tell sometimes. I'm very interested in these kind of novellas that tell a poignant story, that kind of like makes you look back at life or the life of the character. So here it goes. The best-selling Turkish classic of love and longing in a changing world, available in English for the first time. It is perhaps easier to dismiss a man whose face gives no indication of an inner life. And what a pity that is. A dash of curiosity is all it takes to stumble upon treasures we never expected. A shy young man leaves his home in rural Turkey to learn a trade in 1920s Berlin. The city's crowded streets, thriving art scene, passionate politics, and seedy cabarets provide the backdrop for a chance meeting with a woman, which will haunt him for the rest of his life. Emotionally powerful, intensely atmospheric, and touchingly profound, A lot of adverbs there. Madonna in a Fur Coat is an unforgettable novel about the new beginnings and the unfathomable nature of the human soul. I read the introduction. I found it really fascinating because the author, again, we're gonna have to make connections with the author in the work. The author Ali was basically a political dissident in Turkey. He was often writing against the regime and he was often imprisoned for his writings. And this apparently is considered the only book of his that is not at all overtly political. It's kind of like The Great Gatsby, where the protagonist, the one that you start with and that you end, is an external character. So there's this broke poet and he gets a job as a bank clerk. His friend who owns a bank pities him and he's like, oh, stop it with writing your poetry. You write, it's not gonna lead you anywhere. Just come work at my bank. And at the bank, he meets this man, this super old man. I don't know if he's super old, but he's basically old. And he's super intrigued by him. He feels a connection with him. The person who wrote the introduction actually said that we can maybe consider the narrator that meets this older man a sort of younger version of the author relating to an older version of the author. Yeah, again, this is just, whatever. I don't know if it's just speculation. I'm not an academic, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I thought it was super interesting to know that. And you can certainly feel that. So it's like this young poet that's just attracted to this older man, not knowing why, because the older man doesn't let anything out. He feels like he seems stoic. He seems like he just does his duty, sometimes falls ill. But he's a dutiful worker. He's a translator. He translates the bank's documents to German or German back and forth. And yeah, so this guy befriends this old man. And at some point, the old man is in a very critical state. And so there's the question of this notebook, and the man is telling his story. And that's the other tale within the tale. And that's the story of him going to Berlin and seeing this beautiful painting called Madonna in a Fur Coat, that he calls Madonna in a Fur Coat. And anyway, he meets this woman, and that's it. It invites you to contemplate on poetry, on love, on the differences between cultures, on the West, on one's duty, which is very strong and stark and very present still in Eastern culture. I'm very happy to have read Turkish literature. I can imagine it must be so rich in the original language. So yeah, those were the books. All of the books I read in 2024 so far, which is 2 months in. Wow, it was intense. I'm so overwhelmed with amazing literature. It's just such a happy feeling. I love it. I feel like these books resonate with me more in a time where I can also look back into the past and see the things that I have been disillusioned about, the world or society or human dynamics between people, and consolidating the observations through other writers' and authors' work as they lay out their observations in the form of stories or poems or essays, I find fascinating. Again, this is why I'm just gonna give a big love to all the readers out there. This week will be very promising and exciting. Feminist books to be out by International Women's Day, so watch out for that, Friday the 8th. And after that, I'm gonna do a little Paris bookshops tour. I'm gonna tour a bit of the most beautiful and nicest bookshops to visit in Paris when you're here, or just for the pleasure of knowing about them and the pleasure of seeing books all around the world. I love it. Love it! Bye, guys. Weird transition.